I'm Patrick McGrath. I'm Education Technology Strategist here at TextHelp, and I'm really pleased and privileged to be joined today by Dr. Dylan Griffiths from Bangor University in Wales. And we're going to, for the next sort of 10 or 15 minutes, have a really open and frank chat about equity of access, specifically for maths and specifically how technology can help that. As you may be aware, Dylan was on our recent higher education panel where we discussed dynamic maths along with Dr. Vijesh Bhute and also Tracy Galvin from QUB. And so this is part of the series of follow through. And Dylan, we started with Tracy and we talked about how we could embrace change through things like UDL. Vijesh has then taken us on his journey of his project in making maths more accessible to his students and making it more engaging as well. And we talked a little bit about compliance. But we're today going to have a very quick look at equity of access. So really, how can we enable that equity of access? And really, how have you done it in Bangor University? So you're joining us from Bangor University. Dylan, tell us what you do there.
I have two roles really. My role, which I normally do the math support, is for the specialist one-to-one study skills support. That was my previous role before the role I'm doing now, but because I'm the mathematician in that sense, it was hard to replace my old role, so I've absorbed it as part of my new role. So I'm now the manager of the assessment centre, which is responsible for doing the DSA side of support for students. So making recommendations and what types of software or equipment or human or even reasonable adjustments that support students may need whilst at university.
So that sounds like two jobs for the price of one. That sounds like a very, very busy day every day.
Yes,
absolutely. Well,
pretty much, yes.
you bring up DSA, and of course DSA is there for that particular reason, to focus on individual needs of students. And historically, how challenging has maths been to get support within that structure for those students with more specific or individual needs?
If it's anything to do with technology wise, it's traditionally in the past it just wasn't really there. I mean, you could use text to speech and so on, but as soon as they came up with a mathematical equation, a lot of the text to speech software just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So I know with the advent of Equatio coming out, it has helped quite significantly because of how it deals with equations and how it can say it out to students who need the audio cues as well as the ability to read equations on the screen.
So do you feel, in your experience, Dylan, do you feel that students were disadvantaged in terms of equity of access to maths or engineering courses because they didn't necessarily have the tools that could give them that? I kind of hate the phrase, but that level playing field in terms of access. Is that a challenge? Been a historic challenge?
I do believe so. Yes. With regards to supporting students. So in my beginning of the role of the DSA, where Equatio didn't exist for me, it was more of, okay, so you're doing, say, a language or literature course, okay, and you're somebody who understands takes information in more easily by the audio side. So maybe some text-to-speech software would be useful. But then when it comes to, you're doing engineering, you can try this text-to-speech software. It does work for some of the things. So where you have got a lot of wordy things, then it is still ideal. Yeah. But when it comes to anything with equations, just kind of pause it and have a look at it on the screen.
And has that become more okay? You've alluded to the fact that you've seen Equatio really start to fill that void, but has that become, or is it potentially to become, easier for students with the emphasis on statutory compliance? Because obviously it's now a responsibility to make things more accessible. You obviously see that helping students going forward. I assume it increases that level of at least potential access.
Yes, because if the information is there, well, especially in the current situation, almost everything is available electronically, or if it's not available electronically, it's not available. Then because it is electronic, then using a piece of software that can access that electronic material and convert it into a format that the students can use more readily,
Yeah.
it's just ideal.
I suppose we're saying what I'm thinking about just when I talk about compliance there is we're saying from a textile perspective that
Yeah.
we've always talked about Equatio, for example, in the hands of those students, whether it's simply to allow them to express maths with more accuracy in a way that suits them, or for individual needs for access. But also now, I suppose what we're seeing is a huge rise in using Equatio as an authoring tool as well, to kind of plug into that workflow to make sure that, okay, if a student has Equatio, that helps make things more accessible, but it obviously needs to be accessible at the outset as much as possibly can be. So are you seeing not just an adoption from, say, your traditional students you would have worked with through DSA, and perhaps your peers and your colleagues starting to embrace it a bit more because of compliance?
I believe in certain subject areas, it would become more than others. It's in some, would you say academic school? In some, right, might need to cut this bit. In some academic schools where, say, the mathematical or statistical is only, say, one module out of a whole degree course, it is probably less of a priority for them, just because, well, it's just this, we'll do this because this seems to work, that'll do. But if it's something where the course is quite mathematically, statistically, or number heavy, then I would say there is more of a focus in those schools.
Yeah, and actually that probably comes back to something I spoke about with Tracy, which is how we do sort of organizational change when we're approaching things like compliance, and we're all making efforts to get everybody to buy into this concept of accessibility and how important it is for every student. Because of course, the thing with something like Equatio, we built it around universal design for learning, and so the idea is that not just in terms of screen reading and playback, but we could give students multiple ways to express themselves, and that's become very important. And do you see a sort of a rise of that, first of all, in students via DSA, where perhaps Equatio would have been seen as that screen reader tool, that way to capture things? Do you see that it provides better access to create and author things as well now? Have you seen a rise in that?
Well, from a personal standpoint, I have the background of the LaTeX background, so I much prefer to type it in that way. If I was to do any typed mathematical stuff, I would put it in that way myself.
Yeah.
However, I know with the handwriting recognition, students are using smartphones just to do that, rather than having to think of, oh, what's the symbol for this? I know what it looks like, I'll just draw it.
Yeah.
So I've seen, from my perspective, I'm using LaTeX more. I've seen more students using the handwriting side rather than the actual typing, just because they've gone through school handwriting maths. So it's that mindset, which, although it would be a good idea to change that mindset in the short term, at least it's something that they can get used to while they are converting onto the electronic side.
Yeah, and I suppose though that what you've just said there really illustrates where we started in the conversation, which is that equity of access for all. And there will no doubt be students who will embrace LaTeX and have that as part of their course of study, depending on how high level the maths is. But equally, as you've said, those students progressing through from secondary or college through to uni, they may not need or want or have the ability or inclination to go near LaTeX. And for the level of maths, something like handwriting is enough, or straightforward typing in natural language. And I suppose that comes down to equity of access. Every student can access things in the way that suits them. And that, beyond Dylan, DSA then, and those students that you work with on a one-to-one basis, you were an advocate for Equatio to be rolled out across the university. Am I right in saying that?
I would be, yes. The situations have changed as it stands. So I'm not having meetings with with anybody really, apart from my own team. So the larger meetings have ceased to exist in the current situation. But I would go for.
Sorry, no, go ahead. No, finish off there. Sorry, my fault.
I would continue for things like that. I still feel there would be some academic schools where they still wouldn't see it's for them because of the it's only one module sort of idea. But of
Yeah, of
course,
course.
if it is across the whole university, then, well, it's there, even if you only use it for one module.
Yeah. But I suppose at the very least within that, anybody that's studying maths to a relative degree, it's a relative proportion of their course, then that makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, but I suppose what I'm interested in terms of you sort of advocating for that, obviously you're working with students that uh, require or could benefit from one-to-one support. But students outside of that, why do you think a tool like Equatio or UDL tool, that multiple means of, why is that useful to a student who may never come across your door in terms of a student requiring one-to-one support? Where do you see the benefit to them for that?
Well, as you say, DSA is one form of support.
Mhm,
There are some students who, for funding reasons, may not be eligible for DSA.
mhm.
And there's also ones where they are eligible for DSA, but their disability category does not enable them to have certain types of support.
Okay.
So, in all of those, everything I mentioned above, the software would be there to support them, to help them to work towards independence. So yes, there
Yeah.
is study skill support, but the study
Yeah.
skill support is only for a targeted few in a certain sense.
Yeah.
But the support that students can benefit from, why should it be restricted to the targeted few?
Yeah. So that, yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing I've mentioned in some of these previous chats is that one of the things I learned very early on whenever I started my role in text help was the mantra of software tools and particular technology tools that may well be necessary for some but useful for all. And for me, I always felt that Equatio fell into that. I mean, is that something that you would agree with? That's
Yeah,
if it's useful for all students to advance their study, then
yeah.
then yeah, that's something that we should have in place. How does that help, I suppose, with equity of access? You obviously advocate for that. So we talked about compliance. We talked about technology tools. Are there other things that we could be doing within maths that can help equity of access, or are those the two big ones?
I think a lot of times I say to the students, you can think of maths as a different language.
Hmm.
So everything else with your studies is you learn it through the medium of English, whichever
Yeah.
language you're using. You're writing your work in the same language, but maths is a completely different language. It doesn't follow the standard grammar and punctuation and everything else. It is a lot more rigid.
Hmm.
So having tools to be able to allow you to express the language of maths
Yeah.
in its rigid forms needs to be available, really.
Yeah. Okay. And you think that in and of itself really helps that sort of level the playing field, that equity of access piece? Yeah.
Yeah, because as is it people have many different ways of expressing their knowledge, and with, say, a written essay, you are not you don't write. Everybody doesn't write the same thing word for word, so they
Mhm.
can use their own sentences. With the math side, the end result has to be the same because the equation is the equation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how you get that equation in can be important. So, as I said before, those who prefer handwriting to do their equations that way, and then the old format before Equatio was a case of converting that into equation editor,
Yeah.
finding where all those symbols are and everything else. Whereas just, oh, I know what this symbol is. This is a pi or a theta or
Mhm.
whatever. They
Mhm.
can just type theta in and it would find the symbol for them. So I
So
think that enables them to express things more efficiently so people can work at the same pace as well.
yeah, and I suppose that lends itself very well sort of further on down study to the point where you're writing your dissertation or you're writing a thesis, as you progress through university life. So I suppose you're building capacity as well with new
Yeah.
digital tools. Would that be fair?
Yes, absolutely.
So I suppose from a digital perspective, the year that's in it and all that, where we've rapidly moved so many things online. Um, Do you think that's something that's here to stay? You know, we've talked about equity of access, but not just for those students who need it, but those students that generally are adopting a more digital workflow. So the question is, are students adopting a more digital workflow? And if so, is something like Equatio really important to that workflow then moving forward?
I would say yes as a short answer. More long answer, students prior to this year were doing a lot of things digitally anyway.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know of anybody who didn't have a smartphone
Yeah.
or a computer or what both. So they are used to doing things digitally. So any digital tools that are already there to support them is ideal, really.
Yeah. So here to stay. And Equatio, of course, you know, we see it as this bridge to maths, and I think you've articulated that very well. But I think we all know there's a long way to go in terms of what Tracy talked about, which is how we can embrace that change throughout an organization and create awareness for tools like this. But then also how we get students to use it, fundamentally adopt it. But I think we need, you know, as we leave our series there, I think for me it's the perfect way to finish it with you, Dylan, in the way you've articulated things, because ultimately, what are we all about through this? It's equity of access. So a student has a right to the technology and the access to a maths or an engineering course, no matter the level of maths within there, as they do in any other course. And now, thankfully, things like Equatio are there to help them with that. So that you've rounded off the series perfectly well, Dylan, and I thank you for that. Thank you for the time that you have taken to join our panel, and also the time today to have this open and frank chat. And for our viewers and listeners, none of this is prepared, as Dylan will testify to. So these are real and meaningful answers, hopefully, as we go. So Dylan, thank you. All the very best for what sounds like two very busy jobs going forward. And as always, anything we can do to help, we're here to do that. So Dr. Dylan Griffiths, Bangor University, thank you.
Thank you.